Good evening, good morning, good whatever time it is, wherever you might happen to be. Welcome once again to Full Fat Spoiler Chat, the show in which we, the folks at Nerd Caliber, will talk about a recent piece of nerd entertainment in depth. We'll look at what's good about it, what's bad about it, if either of those two things are true, what worked, what didn't work. We'll talk about tone, theme, message, and so on. And to do that, we obviously have to get something to drink. We obviously have to dig deep into the show, so that's why the word spoilers are all around this screen right here. We will be spoiling tonight the Netflix animated movie, The Witcher: Nightmare of the Wolf. I'm Rodney Brown. I'm the editor-in-chief of Nerd Caliber, a first-person shooter on Facebook as a cosplay photographer, Burley underscore adopter on Twitter, and a couple of other places, mostly as a tech journalist. Joining me tonight is our wonderful hat-wearing Chocobo Bot. Introduce yourself if you would.
Hi, I'm Chocobobot, also known as Christina. I am Chocobobot on all social media, and I am one of the interviewers for Nerd Caliber when conventions happen again. And I also write the weekly gaming bites on Nerd Caliber's website.
Yep. And Gamescom is going on right now, so somebody's going to be
Yes.
busy.
Yep.
So that brings up one thing. Before I get to that, today's National Dog Day. As I said on my Monday show, you can tell I'm not in my normal environment if you watch these shows on a regular basis. I am dog sitting. I mean, house sitting, dog sitting, whatever you want to call it. So shout out to the two wonderful dogs that are like right over there. And if somebody walks by and makes a lot of noise out on the street, you'll know that the dogs are here. So apologies in advance if that happens, because it's going to get loud.
I'll add in some more barking
There
just
you go.
to make it less awkward.
So if in fact I'm yelling like hush and shut up and things like that, it will be to the dogs, not to you. Just to be clear. And also, since we're talking about cons, one of the first cons that we're going to be out at in pretty reasonable force is going to be
It's this weekend, right?
this no, next weekend. So the
Next
first
weekend.
full weekend in September is Fan Expo Boston. So Fan Expo Boston is for the former Boston Comic Con. It's at the Boston Convention and Exhibition Center. It's a big con. We will be whenever we do Fan Expo Boston, we wind up taking photos for the cosplay contest. So we take photos of the contestants as well as anybody else who we want to. And this year we will be in the room where the prejudging will be taking place, as opposed to just out on the floor, which I think was a requirement for Pat Covey. He wanted to be in a room that could be closed off. And so we'll be in room 051, all the way at the bottom floor on the showroom floor. If you're coming in from the front, it's down at the end of the hallway on the bottom to the left. But we'll put a map up on our social media and so on so people can see where we're at. So if you're going to be going, stop by. If you can't find us out on the showroom floor, that's why we're in 051. I don't know what they usually call that at PAX East, but I don't want to confuse people with that anyway. So we're going to start right out of the gate telling you what this is. So The Witcher: Nightmare of the Wolf is an animated film that is a prequel story to most of the story that people are familiar with from either the books, the stories, or the game, or the games, or the Netflix live action series with Henry Cavill, all of which tell the story of Geralt of Rivia. This is a prequel that tells how his mentor, Vesemir, first became a Witcher, and then also, and this is kind of spoilery about some of the bigger action that takes place, and it is spoiler chat, but I want to get that right out of the way. I won't spoil any of the detail stuff right yet. That'll happen later. It tells the story of how Geralt's group of Witchers, Geralt, Esker, Lambert, and somebody named Cohen apparently, are essentially the last group of Witchers. Why that happened, what the reasoning for that was, what the inciting incidents for all that happened, how Vesemir wound up being the mentors of all of these, young and last school of Witchers. And it also kind of tells you, well, not all kind of, it definitely tells you a lot more about why in all of the Geralt era book stories, games, etc., the Witchers are treated much more hostilely, or with much more hostility, than you might expect for somebody who goes out and saves people. Um, you know, you can understand the fear. They are, not normal humans anymore. They certainly live way longer than humans. They have the mutant sort of, reddish
eyes.
cat
Yeah.
eyes or snake eyes, depending on the design. So, yeah, they can be frightening, but there's a real reason why people really don't like Witchers, and they go much more in depth into this. And that's a very interesting part of the tale. That's pretty much it. That's the big overarching picture of what this is. It's animated by Studio Mir, the Korean studio that animated Legend of Korra, that animated the most recent Voltron, that it did a couple of episodes of Boondocks.
I thought so.
Yeah.
I thought so.
And you can actually see some of that. I mean, you can see a little bit of Korra in this. You can see not really any of Voltron in some of the character designs, but you can see a little bit of Boondocks in some of this.
Literally, the beginning of the movie, I felt like I was like, this looks very Boondocks to me.
Yep. Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was super Boondocks, and then there was a lot of scenes that were Legend of Korra.
Yeah.
For sure.
They also did, and we did this on, was it a Full Fat Spoiler Chat or an Anime Octane? Dota Dragon's Blood. I think it was a spoiler chat.
I think so.
Which was also Netflix, so you can understand why they get this jobs. They did a couple of episodes for the most recent season of Young Justice Outsiders, which gives them, they are going to be the main animation studio for season 4, which is called Young Justice Phantoms.
Oh, good for them.
Which in theory is coming out this year. So very interesting studio. And voice actors, we'll get into that, I'm assuming, but it's a pretty impressive voice acting cast. So with that as the background of what this is, where it comes from. Oh, one other thing, as far as I can tell, this story is, while obviously based on things that are mentioned, is a completely wholly new story. It doesn't appear that they adapted any specific story or part of a novel or anything like that in telling this. Now we know that Geralt and his compatriots are the last group of Witchers. We know that Kaer Morhen is in a pretty shoddy state by the time of the Geralt adult stories. We know all of that stuff. We just don't really know why, or certainly it's not explored in any depth until this. So now we start with what we liked. So, Christina, what did you like about it? What worked for you? What did they shoot for and achieve?
So I happen to really like it. There were some parts where I was like, all right, this is a little bit predictable. But overall, I generally really liked it. The animation was very good. The story, I thought, was really, really good because it made me want to go back and rewatch the Netflix Witcher series. Because I liked how it kind of built on the lore and built on the world a bit more. And it made me understand things a bit more. And it made me appreciate the relationship later on between Geralt and I can't remember her name now.
His
the
former childhood friend, or the sorceress.
Not Vesemir.
Oh, I'm sorry. The relationship between
Geralt and
okay, Geralt and Yennefer.
Yennefer, yeah, because
Okay.
it made me appreciate that more because of how the witches were kind of the bad guys in this. In a way, they are and they're not. So like their relationship together, to me, I don't know. It seemed more important to me now that they have this kind of like backstory to them. And it just overall it just made me. I really enjoyed it. Honestly, I really did. I think the character designs were pretty good. The voice acting was very, very good. I did have to raise the volume a little bit on it. It had that same kind of like Castlevania thing where like
Yeah.
the sound sometimes had issues, but otherwise it was really really good. My one of my favorite characters was Deglin, mostly because it's Graham McTavish is the voice actor for him, and I love him. I love to hate him.
So that's Deglin on the screen right now.
Yes.
Gruff beard.
He kind of looks like Graham McTavish if he was like in the show. If they like made him a character, he would look like that.
Yeah, kinda. Well,
Give
this
him
is
a wig.
as a really weird aside. Graham McTavish will be in the second season of the live-action Witcher, playing Dijkstra from
Okay.
Witcher 2 and Witcher 3, who is a much more beefy guy as he's portrayed in the games anyway than McTavish. So maybe he is sort of beefing up, and maybe he could play Dick.
I mean, he's not a small man either, though,
No.
because you got to keep in mind he's really tall
Yes.
too. He's very, very tall. I know him mostly from Outlander, and like in it, obviously he's wearing like Scottish Highland attire, which doesn't really show off physique well. But there are some scenes where you're like, this is not a small guy. So I'm excited for that. I'm always excited for more Graham McTavish. I love his voice. It leads so well to anything. Theo James did a really good job as well. He's Vesemir, and he was Hector in Castlevania. Definitely liked this role for him better. I really loved also Vesemir and Tetra's story together. I thought was really sweet. Like it didn't bother me their kiss later on. I was like, oh, like I liked them. I liked them a lot.
And that's them on the screen right now. That's, quote unquote, young Vesemir, who is roughly 70 when you see him in this image. But then again,
yeah.
They age differently.
Oh wait, not Tetra. It's Lady Zerbst.
Oh, Lady Zerbst. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Tetra's the witch.
So this is Lady Zerbst and Tetra.
Yeah.
But in the story, when you see Vesemir as a young man, young Vesemir, let me see, there we go. Before he decides to take Deglin's invitation to become a Witcher, the person that you can see at the edge of the frame here is his childhood friend Ilyana, who we eventually find out is in fact Lady Zerbst, around 70 years old. So,
and we assume he was like around her age, so he's either 70, 71, something like that.
Right.
So.
When
he's older.
And that Lady Zerbst was Mary McDonnell from Battlestar Galactica and McConnell. Am I getting her name wrong? McDonnell.
Young Ilyana is Thorn from the Scooby-Doo movies. And does a few other things, but I love her as Thorn. And I
Jennifer
like
Hale,
recognize, I recognize that voice right away. I was like, oh man. So yeah, the voice acting was great. I did really like their kind of love story, not love story, tragic story together. I thought was very cute. A little predictable, but it worked. Like that's fine. It's okay for things to be predictable sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I loved how it explained things. And it's like I thought it was a great lead-in because the way it ends kind of works as a great lead-in to the Witcher live-action series, too.
So as I mentioned, it does tell the story of how Vesemir wind up being the mentor for this last group of kids. And this is great. It ends with what Christina is saying, Vesemir finding the kids who had actually escaped this big attack on Kaer Morhen, and bringing them back to teach them how to be better people.
And he goes, "This is the last time I'm going to let you waver in your decisions, right?" I
Something
think is
like
the
that.
line.
Yeah, hesitate.
Hesitate. Yeah, it's the last time you can hesitate.
But one of the people that right there is young Geralt after he had successfully gone through the trial of grasses
and apparently was bald.
So the reason his hair came in white and has been white ever since it came back is one of the after effects of the trial of grasses for him is that it just made him bald.
I think. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think they also did that because, like, if you had one kid with white hair, it would have been obvious who that was compared to the other ones. So like
Right.
I think it was also like, oh, which one of the kids is he? And then it's like, oh, surprise, he's the bald one. Like I I think it was a little bit of that too.
Yeah.
But I'm not one of the creators of the show, so I don't know. That's just my educated guess.
Also described by the other kids as the coward of the group. You know,
Yes, he tried to run away.
yeah. So very interesting. Um, so other than anything else that you want to point out that you thought was really notable?
I saw that they put a few Easter eggs in there. Like obviously one of the pretty obvious ones is like the whole bathing scene, how it's like a copy of like the infamous bathtub scene.
Yeah,
um,
they had to give one of those. This is Vesemir
yeah.
taking a bath.
Can you see how he's his mentor? They even
Exactly.
bath the same way. But I liked that. I also liked Kitsune Kitsu, right? Kitsu.
No, I didn't. I
Actually,
couldn't find. Well, I could find a fairly high res image, um, but Kitsu, who is nobody
like
and everybody
corrupted
is a
elf.
villain in this, other than Lady
Yeah.
Zerbs. So it's kind of hard to say. But technically, is the main antagonist. Let's put it that
Yeah.
way. Is an elf girl that was captured and turned into a hybrid of an elf and a mar, a type of monster that can make you see
It's
visions.
like a mimic. Yeah.
Well, it doesn't change; it makes you see things. Um, but so all of the images are of this girl, this elf girl, basically naked.
Hmm.
Monstrous looking, but still very humanoid enough to be concerning. So even though I did find one fairly high res image, it's like, yeah, no, that one's not going to go in the list.
And then I think also, isn't Phil Evander, isn't his voice actor the actual one who plays him
Uh,
in the live action? I think.
I don't know. Let me find out.
I th-
Because I have the IMDb listings up right here.
I think he's the actual actor.
So Tom Canton is the voice of Phil Evander, or Phil Evandrel, and duh, 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 duh.
I thought I remember seeing that, but I could be wrong.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so
Um,
that's also cool. I
oh,
think that was nice. Of
only
them.
in one episode from the first season. So,
Hmm.
but yes, you're right. Good call.
So I mean that's like a cool thing that they were like, oh, they could have easily just like casted some random person to, voice act the role, but they went with the live action actor. So I think that was like nice on their part kind of thing.
Yep.
But yeah, no, I really liked it. Trying to think what else part. The I I liked Vesemir's character as a whole. He was definitely that like in the beginning, that total kind of like jerk
Yes.
character, for lack of a better word. But he had, I mean, it's one movie, so granted, they kind of have to go quickly a little bit with character development, which nothing wrong with that. But he does change by the end, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah. And major character development obviously is driven by major
Yeah,
life
events.
changes and emotional attachments and so on. And yeah, he goes through all of those in this 90-minute movie.
Yeah.
So you're right. They do kind of rush his growth arc, but it's a 90-minute movie, and all of the reasons why it happens, even though they may be a little faster than you would think it would happen, are legit reasons. So.
I think I froze for a second.
Okay, so basically, I like the same things. I think the voice acting cast is phenomenal. I'm not crazy about Theo James as a live action actor. I mean, he's most known for being the male lead in all the Divergent movies.
Hmm.
But also, the voice of Hector. So as a voice actor, he's obviously really, really talented. And he's fantastic as Vesemir.
Hmm.
He captures all of that, jerk to, and I'm going to go later on into, I think jerk is a mild very
Yeah, I
mild.
just didn't know how much I could
Yeah.
go language-wise.
Well, I mean, you don't necessarily need to go completely off the rails with language to describe just how bad a
Yeah.
character he is
He was
at the
a
beginning.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, so the voice cast is fantastic. Of course, Mary McDonnell is wonderful. It's so great to hear her do anything. Um, the animation is fantastic. It is so much more watchable than, and this may be just because the series writing itself on Dota Dragon's Blood was so awful, but it makes it's so much more watchable than Dota Dragon's Blood. Um, that thing was a piece of garbage. This is so much not. The backgrounds are beautiful. The environments are beautiful.
Hmm.
The character designs are really solid. And like I said, you can see at times, young Vesemir
Yeah, I mean there was like one or two
has.
times where you're like,
Well, yeah, but I mean, that absolutely has. That's a Legend of Korra influence if I ever saw one.
mhm,
You just look at young Vesemir there. And you can see some of the other things. I think the most boondockish looking thing is this sort of close up shot of Daglin. The lighting, the angle. I mean, that's a real Boondocks kind of look. Um, so if you know what you're looking for, you can definitely see uh, you know where Studio Mir's other work has influenced this. But it's
mhm,
its own thing, and they also capture the general feel of the games and the live action series really well.
mhm,
Kaer Morhen looks like Kaer Morhen. It's not an exact copy of the way it appears in the games, but it's close enough that there's no question. With the lake right out in front of it and all of the it's like okay, yeah, that's Kaer Morhen. And the general feel of the world where you see the towns and so on. One of the things about the games that I really like is uh, unlike unfortunately a lot of other games, you know the world in some of those games, every building is so wide open it just makes no sense. And that's from a design standpoint. They want people to be able to move around in it. In the Witcher games, you walk into a tavern that's in a little small village and it's, you're bumping into people. It's just a tiny little building. And even the biggest city, Novigrad, which is grand in scale in some ways, many of the streets are just narrow little, streets. And
mhm.
they capture that design very well in, I can't think of the name of the town that, is the closest town to Kaer Morhen. But it looks like that sort of Northern European, high medieval, just pre-Renaissance kind of town.
I think they kept everything pretty much relatively like grayscale in a way too. Like there was a lot of like gray overlay on
Right.
it, which they keep in the live action as well.
Yeah.
And then there's like those hints of like when magic is involved, usually those hints of like really bright colors and like it works very well.
Right. So like this, where you've got Vesemir, the tones are muted. You've got the browns and the grays and the blues from the mountains and the snow in the background. But then his face is being lit by the Igni fire blast coming out of his hand, and the fire blast is just bright orange and up to white, bright white, and deep reds and so on. Yeah, it looks really cool.
I think
Um,
that's just good storyboarding at that point and
yeah,
direction.
yeah,
Yeah.
good direction, good animation. It's a really well crafted product. I also really like the nature of how the story, without being exposition at all, tells us a lot about the how the world got to where it is by the time we're reading the books or in the games or whatever about Geralt. Um, and one of those things is Witchers, when they were constantly making new groups of Witchers every generation or so, and they lived really long, it got to the point where there were Witchers kind of like, samurai after Ieyasu Tokugawa, sort of clamped down and became, the shogun for everything, there's an awful lot of samurai who didn't have any wars to fight. So they turned to banditry and so on. And that's the case with the Witchers in this timeline, or at this point in time in the actual timeline. They were, cheating people, lying to people, which is one of the reasons why they got the terrible reputation. They were considered lying, cheating, murdering scum, because many of them were, just like the samurai, that turned to banditry in feudal Japan. So I love that. I love the fact that it filled out the story of why that is the last group. And that is a really intricate plot point. That it turns out that, and again, spoiler chat, blah, 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 we've said this before. It turns out that Daglin, working with the mages, so Kaer Morhen at that time had mages that were dedicated to actually doing the research and creating the formulas and so on to turn people into witchers. Daglin and the mages of Kaer Morhen were creating new types of hybrid monsters because the witchers were running out of things to kill. And
too good at their jobs.
They were too good at their jobs, or they were making too many of them, frankly.
Yeah.
And monsters really don't breed like, people do. So,
well, yeah, they make that point. They're like, they can't crossbreed themselves. Like, it's
right.
It's not a thing.
Right, it's not a thing. So that you're not going to wind up with some sort of weird crossbreed suddenly taking over, or tons of them being out there.
Yeah.
They are their own species and their own thing, and once a whole bunch of them are gone, the odds that that species will be able to continue in any large scale is done, and the Witchers are doing a really good job of killing them. So that's the big mystery and the big, confrontation when it is discovered by Tetra, who is the sorceress that we see here, and that was in that shot with her and Vesemir, who has, for some reason, we find out why, has this real axe to grind against Witchers. Once Kaer Morhen destroyed by the king of, was Ardcarrig, the land that they're in, and just absolutely wants Witchers gone. Saying about Tetra. So ultimately you find out that Tetra is also involved in this. Tetra was the one who created the hybrid Kitsu, the elf girl who had been mixed with genetic material from Amar, and the reason she did that was to basically bring down Kaer Morhen and reveal that they had been making these hybrid monsters all along. Once that was revealed, the townspeople, attacked Kaer Morhen in droves, very Frankenstein, pitchforks and
angry
torches.
mob.
Angry mob. But then Tetra brought, with Kitsu, brought all kinds of monsters out of the swamps and forests and so on around Kaer Morhen to attack. So we find out why Kaer Morhen is in such a terrible state in the games and in the books, is because of this. And because of that, they wound up destroying the laboratory where all of that stuff was created, but also killing the mages that created the formulas for the Trial of Grasses and so on. So Vesemir is really the only one who remembers how to make any of that stuff, and is so disgusted by what he discovers Daglin and the mages have been doing that that's it. Geralt's group is the last group. There won't be any more Witchers after that.
For now.
Well, for now. Unless you've played the games or read the books. But anyway, so I really like that. I think that they did such a good job of filling in all of that as story, not as exposition or anything else. It all happens.
I agree with that. They didn't have to be like, here's all the things that are happening. We're not going to show you it, but we're just going to talk about it. It's in the past.
It was an entirely show, not tell, and done really well. Let's see, is there anything else I particularly liked about it?
Did you have a favorite character?
all right, so I'm going to hold off this discussion until things I didn't like, but the answer to that is no. Well, that's not true. Lady Zerbst,
She's good. She's a good character.
because she is literally the only good character.
Mm-hmm.
Um, with the possible exception of Philivandrel,
Mm-hmm.
who comes across as a pretty good and noble character.
Yeah.
And I'll get into this later on, but other than that, everybody in this story is terrible.
Yeah.
Some
Pretty
of them
much.
have a longer, deeper redemption and growth arc, Vesemir in particular.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them they try to give a bit of a redemption at the end, Deglin.
Yeah.
But other than that, pretty much everybody is just awful. And I'll get into that. So since we've got to that point, and since you brought that up, before I get into my sort of things about this, Christina, what didn't you like about it? What didn't work for you?
So I guess my biggest thing was I kind of wish it was maybe split into two movies because that extra time would have been used to kind of like develop some characters a little bit more. Granted, I think they were done pretty well for like being one movie. It was done very well, but
Yep.
with maybe one other movie, like just a two-parter kind of thing, you would have had more character development. It would have been maybe less predictable.
Yeah.
They could have put more twists and turns in the story to kind of, make you not figure it out 5 minutes into the movie. Like,
Tetra's reveal about why she hates witchers was like, oh, move on. Like,
yeah.
Okay.
Like I mean,
They could have explored that a lot more and made her character, which already is pretty complex, a much more complex character.
Yeah, I feel like I didn't like. Granted, I did like a lot of the characters, but I didn't like resonate with any of them. Like I didn't feel a connection to any of them because it's
Right.
so short too. I think that would have been improved if it was a two-part thing as well. I also like going to the movie, the part where they're doing their first flashback of Vesemir, and he's helping the noblewoman that him and his father worked for. She was like possessed.
Right.
When Deglin is first shown and he comes up in that scene and he's like, oh, try and catch this monster. Already in my head, I was like, oh, he wants to catch it to use it on another person to get money. Like, I already figured out the plot,
Yeah.
like, from there. And that's really maybe, 15 minutes into the movie? 10 maybe? I don't know. I didn't timestamp it, but it's pretty
fairly early on. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fairly early on. Granted, I didn't know like the in-depth detail of the plot, but I like figured that's a major plot point, and I figured it out so early. I was like, all right, let me try and work for it a little bit more. I like that. Don't just feed me it. What else? There were the fight scenes were very good. There were some parts where the animation had like quick issues, like a quick like didn't move really and had like a static thing when they should have been moving maybe during like a jump or spin or something. But I feel like that's almost the art style of that studio because I've noticed they do that in their other works too. So I'm not going to like critique them on what could possibly be their art style. Like I said before, the sound too, I did have moments of having to adjust the sound. And I still don't know if this is a Netflix issue or if this is like a studio issue.
So it's a streaming issue. Netflix and all kinds of streamers. I do the same thing with Disney Plus. I always wear either earbuds or headphones whenever I watch anything on Disney Plus because, if I turn my, speakers, and I mean at when I'm not on my laptop, when I'm at my desktop back at home, my dual monitors, my two side speakers flanking right at me, and a subwoofer in my audio system, I still can't clearly hear the dialogue in like Castlevania, or in The Mandalorian, if I don't have earbuds in. So
yeah, I think it might just be a Theo James thing because like the people I had most of the issues with was Vesemir.
Yeah.
he seemed to be the one that sometimes was too soft spoken. So it might just be that he's just too soft spoken for at some times when he does voice acting. I don't want to call him out. I think he does a good job. It's just he was I had to raise the volume a few times. So um but I'm trying to think what else. Yeah, I guess like the story was fine. I mean it didn't really like it was an explanation, so it didn't really have too many plot holes, I don't think. At least I didn't notice. I just wished it kind of had a longer time frame to it to do it. That's what I would critique. Would maybe not try to shrink it into like the 90-minute or whatever, 95 minutes.
Yeah.
That they did.
Yeah, I agree with that because I think so. You've got enough of a shocking betrayal plot heel turn thing with Deglin and the mages at Kaer Morhen making these hybrid monsters, and and they're all doing this just so that more Witchers can make more money, and they don't even bring up the idea that maybe there's a noble purpose so that the Witchers can stop being robbing, cheating, killing scumbags and go back to actually killing monsters. He doesn't even mention that. It's.
I feel like Deglin could had started or had wanted to say something like that, and then they were just like, "Nah, let's just make him be an ass."
But that's enough of a twist that they absolutely didn't need to include Tetra's hatred of Witchers in that same plot, to have essentially her be doing the same thing, as a way to expose what the Witchers at Kaer Morhen are doing and get people to attack it. It was just like, oh, okay. Oh, and by the way, this sorceress has been doing that too. Like, really?
So is it that was one of your issues? There was too many, I guess, like not even morally gray, just mean, bad characters.
Well, yes, and I'll get to that now, because this complaint is more about the fact that they put this story element in that they didn't give enough time to expand on, and or didn't really need to be there. If they had given it enough time to expand on it and make it more tightly integrated to, Deglin's traitorous plot, then it would have made sense. But it felt kind of just like a tack on. It's like, here's a really interesting character, and oh, by the way, here's why she's ultimately going to be in conflict with Vesemir and everybody else, and it's because she's doing exactly the same thing essentially, and because this is why she hates Witchers, she's doing it. Like, okay, like you said, maybe if this is a two-part movie, let's expand that a little bit. That sounds like that could be pretty interesting, but they don't.
Yeah, I think it just needed either a longer runtime or just a second part to it to kind of do all the things they wanted to do.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So the other thing you had mentioned about my, kind of dislike of the characters themselves, Vesemir starts out and is, until he has his big revelation at the end, basically when, he finds out
pretty much at the end.
Yeah, at the end. An amoral scumbag.
Yeah.
And I mean amoral. He is given the opportunity to rescue elven children that have disappeared. And because there's no money involved, he says no. He has absolutely zero morals and is just a greedy, luckily mostly a monster killer, although he freely admits he cheats people.
Yeah. There was that one line where he goes, "Oh, I wish I thought of that," and I forgot what had been explained.
Yeah,
it was like it was something kind of nasty. I
right.
remember.
It was somebody else. I think it was Luca, one of his Witcher companions, who I'll give a credit. It's really interesting. Luca is openly gay, clearly, and uses it to actually intimidate a knight in the service of the king of actually it's Cadwin, I think, is where they're at. So that was actually kind of cool that Vesemir and obviously all of the other Witchers are like, okay, gay, who cares? Um,
I that was one another thing that I didn't like. I kind of wish we saw more of Luca because I felt like he had a lot of cool things that could have been explored with him, and they
right,
kind of cut him short and just like off with his head.
yeah.
It's like,
Um,
okay, cool. I guess he's dead now.
yeah, he is introduced, and basically, if he is as close to a male character being fridged as you can get. You
Hmm.
know, he's introduced, he's given a little bit of things to do, he's an interesting character, and then he's killed. Well, actually, it's not really fridged because it's not motivation for Vesemir or anybody else to do anything really.
Yeah, no one of importance even sees him get killed
Right.
to even do like a revenge thing on him. They just kind of find out he's dead, and they're just like, well, he's dead. And I'm like,
Yeah, it's like,
and then yeah, and the other character too, who I thought could have had some cool backstory a little bit, was their other friend, the one who was really short.
oh,
Because it was like a trio of them.
Svern or something like that. Yeah, the
Yeah,
dwarf.
yeah. Like I wanted to know more about like because they clearly had like a like love hate thing going on, the
Yeah,
three of them,
yeah,
and I wanted a little bit more of it. And you see it for like literally two scenes when they're introduced, and then quickly in the bar, and then never again.
yeah. They kind of have the dynamic in the games anyway of um, Eskel, Lambert, and Geralt,
Mhm.
as adults.
Yeah.
And that is kind of fun to see, with actually a little bit more playfulness back and forth, even. You're right, that would have been cool. But so my problem with this is, as you mentioned, there's kind of nobody that resonates with you. There's nobody that you're gonna like in this except Lady Zerbst.
Yeah.
Vesemir is unlikable, literally right up until the end. He is not a character anybody should ever admire. Um, Deglin for sure. All the mages and so on. Luca kind of, although even Luca is absolutely thrilled to tell the stories about how he cheats people.
Yeah.
So I admire, as I sort of mentioned in the things that I like, I admire that they're willing to tell this tale of that's kind of like the post starting of the Tokugawa shogunate, samurai that have essentially moved on to banditry, and allowed us to see how terrible things have become for the Witchers because of their own activity.
Hmm.
But I don't have to like it, or I don't have to like the people involved. They're awful. If it was a longer movie, or if the writers had given us a couple of sprinkles early on about Vesemir being maybe a little unsure about all of this, greedy, amoral scumbag, functionality,
Hmm.
we would have enjoyed his turn when when he discovers that Deglin is a traitor and so on, even more. We could have said, okay, yeah, back then he was already kind of going, is this really the right thing? That's not it. He is 100% in the game of being an amoral scumbag,
Hmm.
right up until he isn't.
Yeah.
So and Vesemir is the lead. He's the guy that we're supposed to admire. He is certainly admirable in the books and the games, and will be in the series. Um, but there's absolutely nothing admirable about him until he makes that change at the end, and suddenly becomes the mentor to the youngest, the last group of Witchers.
It's not even like the end fight. Is he still not kind of like a because everything when he starts to have that change, it's all pure selfish because the love of his life is in trouble.
Right.
He doesn't really, it's more about that, and it's literally not until the last scene when he sees the children that he starts to have a
Well,
to be a
right
good
before that,
guy.
when Deglin saves him,
Oh,
and
when
then his
yeah,
dying wish is,
yeah,
go mentor these kids and make them better people than we were.
yeah. It's that and the last scene, so it's only literally two scenes.
Right, right. And so this could have used more development of Vesemir as a character who might become good, instead of suddenly Vesemir, who's a scumbag, becomes good.
Yeah, because I mean, the first scene we see him, he is he's saving this kid from getting killed by a monster, but it's so he could pickpocket the dead father, and he doesn't even stay to help bury the family that died from the monster. He
Doesn't
just
even
leaves
escort
the
the kid to the next
Yeah.
village.
He just leaves him. He's like,
He says,
go that way.
walk until you find somebody and tell them that you get attacked.
Yeah.
I'm like, really? Okay. But so anyway, that's my main complaint about this, and my other minor complaint, which might have solved some of this, is like you said, it's too short. It could have used a full 2 hours, or it could have been a two-parter, so that it could have expanded this stuff out. But they needed to make the characters a little bit more likable before the only one who ultimately becomes likable becomes likable. And other than that, I don't have any complaints. And that isn't a complaint to say don't watch it. I mean, by all means, it's fantastic animation. Like I said, I really love the story and how it fills out all of this backstory in a way that isn't exposition. It's an exciting adventure, mystery, etc. Oh, I do have one other complaint. And I can't believe I'm the one that's saying this, but I found the nudity to be incredibly gratuitous. Not Vesemir's, although that, it's like, I was fully expecting Vesemir and Philandroval, or Philavandrel, to, like, hint that they were gay or something.
I thought that too a little bit, I'll be honest.
Yeah, I mean, that was a gay scene. There was a lot of homoerotic subtext to that scene. But, at the beginning, or near the beginning, where we first meet Deglin, where he is, rescuing this noble woman who, her husband thinks is ill, but he, recognizes is possessed by Amar. And in her struggling, before Deglin is able to actually pull the thing out, she winds up tearing her nightgown bodice open. And so she's, struggling around, and her boobies are, well, no, it's not Gynax. I mean, they're not doing that. But
she had like
she had normal
appropriate proportion,
appropriately proportioned breasts, but they were on display, and it's like, what? How did that happen? How did that tear open like that? Why would the Mar do that if the Mar did it? What it was literally there to go. Look. This is a Witcher story. We'd better have boobies in it somewhere.
I legit thought she was gonna try and like seduce young Vesemir because the boobs were out. Like I thought that scene was gonna go a lot differently.
Thankfully, it didn't go
because
that far.
of that. No, but like, did you get that same feeling? Like,
you
thought it was
no, I thought
go
there was for a second there was a potential that the boobs came out so that
to distract him,
right?
And,
that was a part of the plot. And no, they weren't. That was literally just gratuitous boobery.
Yeah.
And so that kind of bothered me. That didn't need to be there. I get that blood and violence and scary monsters in the woods and all of that stuff is part of the Witcher, and nudity, and sexuality is all part of the Witcher, milieu, whether it's the books or the games or what have you. Why? When it doesn't make any sense for the character, why have the bodice ripping?
Yeah, I did like the gore though. The gore was done well.
The gore was done well. And in most cases it made sense. They didn't linger on it in any way that
they were kind of quick with their gore,
right?
For the most part.
As opposed to, oh look, here's a writhing woman with her breasts exposed. Let's show that again. Let's hold on to that for a little while. Anyway. And again, I'm sure a lot of the people who are watching this or watch it are going to go, is that really Rodney? Yes, it's me. But anyway, so those are my complaints, and like I said, it's not much. Tone, theme, message. Is there a consistent tone? Is there a message here that we're trying to take out of this? What do you think?
I mean, I guess like if we're doing theme, it'd be like, greed will only be your downfall, clearly.
Yep.
But I guess the message more, I think, is to show how different the two Witchers are. Because you have Geralt of Rivia, who is kind of like literally like, I mean, he has his ups and downs, but he's more of like your traditional hero.
Right.
When you compare him to Vesemir, who clearly is not a hero per se in most of this. He is and he isn't. Like he by technical description is a hero. He's saving people from monsters, but he's not doing it for good reasons.
Right.
It's all about that coin, while as you look at our other Witcher and we have it's more he's protecting people.
Right.
Out of kindness.
Or monsters. I
Yeah.
mean, Geralt
Or
doesn't
monsters,
always kill.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
And I think it was also more to also show more of how I guess like it's very polarizing between them.
Yep.
This made it very polarizing between the two characters, because we have the mage love interest in one, and now we have mages are bad in the other one. We have, witchers are not good in one, and witchers are good and they're saving people in one, and it's I enjoyed having, I guess, the theme of polar opposites, I guess.
Yeah.
But that's only if you compare the two.
Yeah.
So I guess that would be another one. Can't think of anything else.
So I think one of the big differences is that when Geralt has non-heroic moments, like he was the Butcher of Blaviken, and that's part of his backstory. It happened. Sometimes he actually uses that knowledge or the fact that people know about that to his advantage, to scare people or whatever. But in all of Geralt's story, that's always, as he says, sometimes heads are going to roll. But that's not always the case, and he'd like it not to be ever the case, or at least not as often as it possibly can be, or as infrequent as you can possibly make it, put it that way. In this, Vesemir is 100% amoral.
Yeah.
Again, right up until the end, there is nothing that tells you that sometimes good stuff happens and sometimes bad stuff happens. Good stuff happens only if there's coin involved.
Yeah.
And bad stuff happens if there's not enough coin involved, or he's just not getting coin and he needs to cheat somebody. And so I think that's a big contrast here between the Vesemir we get in the story and, frankly, all the other Witchers at this period of, Witcherdom. And mostly Geralt, but also the others. Lambert's a lot more of the kind of, he doesn't really cheat anybody, but he's also not necessarily ever going to go out of his way to be a good guy in the games and in the books. But he's certainly nothing like what Vesemir or all of the other, amoral scumbag witchers were during the time of this movie.
Amoral scumbag witchers.
They are. So
you could almost say like humanity and morality and just like a conscience is also the difference between them. Some of them just don't seem to have any of those things.
Well, again, and I hate to beat this dead horse, but that gets back to the problem of the writing. Clearly Vesemir has to have a core of humanity. Otherwise, he cannot turn and become the mentor and the good guy that he becomes at the very end of this movie, and that we know from the books or the games. But we're never shown that that's even a possibility for him.
Yeah, maybe if they continue it, maybe do a little bit of a in-between.
Yeah, but then he's already at that good point. Unless he's going to show that he's struggling to be a good guy and he's actually an asshole to the kids. And I don't want to see that. But anyway, so I think that, that is pretty much greed is bad. And also doing things, that you have to have a moral compass.
Playing God is also never ends well.
Yes, and playing God never ends well. As, Tetra found out and Deglin found out and so on. I give that to Vesemir. Mages. He never plays God. He plays, the devil more than anything. It's, I want mine and I don't care what happens.
I just want coin.
Now, I will have to say, tonally, this really does feel like like the books, like the games, and so on. And frankly, if you aren't in the mood for that, this might be too much of a downer.
Yeah, I could see that.
The games can be pretty damn dark. So can the books. And there is no comic relief dandelion in this. Luca is the closest thing that you get to that, and he's just as much of a greedy scumbag as Vesemir is. So
Yeah, we don't have a bard singing "Toss a coin to your Witcher" in this one.
exactly, or getting into stupid misadventures that are
Yep.
that give you a bit of a break in the in the tone and the downbeat nature of. But that's the nature of the books. Sapkowski does a fantastic job of creating a deeply morally complex world. This movie, none of the characters are morally complex until the very end.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. And it's just about an hour, so we are wrapping up. Our next show is going to be Monday, is going to be No Nerd Caliber, and we will be talking about our top 3 favorite robot characters. And by robot, I mean a non-biological intelligence. Or ambulatory intelligence, I guess I should say. Non-biological intelligence could be an AI computer somewhere, and that's not what... We're talking about robots. So, technically, a completely biologically made organism like the replicants, Roy Batty, would not qualify.
But Johnny Number 5 qualifies.
Absolutely. Ash or Bishop from the Alien series qualifies because while they're squishy, none of that is organic.
They bleed milk.
Right. And their veins look more like tubes and so on. So, they are manufactured, grown manufactured in many cases, but they are manufactured entities. So that's going to be our top 3, and that's because on next Thursday, our full fat spoiler chat will be the last of the Transformers War for Cybertron series. In this case, it's Transformers War for Cybertron Kingdom, I think, and that is the 3rd of the short series that have been recently done. So that's why we're tying into the whole robot thing. And then, of course, Tuesday we have our Nerd Week Live, like we always do, where we talk about nerd news. And there's already, of course, not just Gamescom stuff, although some of that will be in there, but there's already a lot of other things that have been, we've been setting aside for that show. Fan Expo Boston, I already mentioned it. If you're going to be in the Boston area, check us out in room 051. If you get an opportunity, please go to patreon.com/nerdcaliber. Check it out. If you'd like to support us, we'd love to have you as one of our patrons. Just a couple of tiers. They're both pretty low dollar. The idea is to help us to get to more cons like Fan Expo Boston and MegaCon and so on. By the way, the more MegaCon galleries will be going up on the website starting tomorrow. We had one that went up yesterday. We have some going up tomorrow, and there'll be more as we go along.
Check them out.
Check them out. So, Christina, give us a goodbye.
All right. Well, I have been Chocobo Butt, and we have been talking about The Witcher, Nightmare of the Wolf on Netflix.
Took you a second, but that's okay.
I know. I was like, wait.
Wait, what was the name of this damn movie we just watched?
And yeah, right. And you can find me at Chocobo Butt on any platform. So just have fun, just typing in Chocobo Butt on random things, see if I pop up.
There you go.
It'll be like a little roulette game.
And as I said, first person shooter, I'm Rodney Brown. And I will see you guys at an upcoming con, hopefully, and definitely at Fan Expo if you're going, or Fan Expo Boston, that is. And as we've been saying, stay safe.
Yep.
Wear a mask when you're in a big crowd. It's still a smart thing to do, even if you've been vaccinated. Well, one, if you haven't, get vaccinated. Two, even if you've been vaccinated, and, you could be an asymptomatic infected carrier like Governor Abbott in Texas, who is just signed an executive order that says no local governmental entity can enforce a mask mandate. Anyway.
Don't forget to wash your hands also.
Yeah, don't forget to wash your hands, which is always a good idea with any kind of thing. We have discovered, obviously, that this is much more of an airborne transmission, particles, and so on, but they still can land on stuff. Anyway, stay safe, folks. We'll see you in an upcoming